Welcome to Brazen Education with Educator Barnes, a podcast with a focus on speaking your truth, being transparent to help others, and having no shame about it. Because we can't move forward until the truth is known. Hi everyone, welcome back to Brazen Education. This is part 2 of Let's Talk About Sex Education. Today, my special guest is Scott Phelps. He is the Executive Director of Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership, and he was recommended to me by the wonderful ladies behind Get Up and Teach. Scott, welcome to the show today.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's hop right into it. Last time on my show, we talked a little bit about inclusive education. But what's really important to me is to share with my listeners about abstinence-based education. I have a couple of reasons for that. One, I have been a Hoosier, been in Indiana my whole entire life. And in Indiana, our sex education programming is abstinence-based. And most of my followers know I am a practicing Christian, and that is the way I am raising my sons with my husband. So it was important to me to make sure I did a well-rounded approach of talking about all the various ways that we can have this conversation. So Scott, what is your approach to talking about sex education with our youth?
Yeah, good. Glad to hear all of that. And I think it's great that you're in Indiana. I think of all of the laws in the country governing this topic, Indiana for me is at the top. There are a lot of states that have very convoluted, unhelpful guidance, but I think the Indiana guidance is actually quite helpful. And so I think that's really a good thing. What we need public policy to do is provide students with the optimal health options available to them. And abstinence until marriage certainly is that regarding sexual activity. So our approach is what we do is we train and equip educators and parents to teach programs and to inform public policy and media outlets on the benefits of abstinence until marriage. We don't do a lot of direct education with students. We do some, but mostly it's larger than that. That's how we actually started out, is working in classrooms in Chicago, in the public schools, in the inner city. And that's really how we got started. And so our approach is really equipping and informing and encouraging with factual information. We make a really key distinction between, say, education and indoctrination. Indoctrination is me sort of sharing my personal beliefs and trying to push my personal beliefs on others. Education, on the other hand, is providing critical thinking skills and really leading and guiding and helping students to come to conclusions on their own that are good and healthy. And so we want to walk them through that process. So, for example, I will say to kids when I'm talking to kids, look, I'm not here to tell you what to do. The choices you're going to make are your own. But I think I can share with you some information that could be really helpful for you in deciding what you want to do. And so that's really the way we want to do it. We want to really equip young people to make good, healthy, informed decisions about their future. And we would make a clear distinction between an objective presentation and a subjective presentation. Much of what's out there today, unfortunately, is subjective. It's a person's personal beliefs and values and ideas being sort of communicated to young people. We don't believe that really has any place in a classroom. We believe that the role of the educator, and you would know this as an educator yourself, is to equip young people with objective information, factual information, research-based information. So, for example, everything that we say is rooted in research. Independent of what I may think about the thing, this is what the thing is. And so everything that we say, all of our materials are well-resourced and documented so that we are giving good, clear, precise guidance to our young people. So we're not about trying to get kids to, take on a personal opinion of an educator, but rather have a factual understanding so that they can make good decisions for us. So that's our approach. I would say our mission statement is this: Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership exists to ensure that every teenager in the country has the opportunity to hear a clearly reasoned, positive presentation on the benefits of abstinence until marriage and instruction on preparing for a healthy future marriage. We think every kid in the country should have that opportunity, and sadly, they don't right now. Most schools around the country, anecdotally, I would say, do not teach the benefits of abstinence until marriage. They may teach some form of abstinence, meaning, if you don't want to get pregnant on Friday night, don't have sex on Friday night. They will treat it as sort of a birth control option among many. But in terms of understanding the objective framework of choosing to reserve all sexual activity for the context of marriage, it's not a concept that's out there. And so we exist to sort of fill that gap, to help schools communicate a clear message on the benefits of abstinence. So I could go on, but I better take a breath and then let you say something. And then I can do some PowerPoint stuff, show some facts and figures that way too, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and you can go ahead and share your screen. And I appreciated what you said about even though you're sharing this information, you're not necessarily sharing a belief system. You're sharing things rooted in research, and it is an option. I know some of the pushback I initially got with the first episode is like, how are you a Christian and like sharing this inclusive information that I did on the first episode? And I said, people who are Christians or who have certain beliefs, their beliefs are not going to necessarily be changed because they hear other information. And so at the end of the day, like you said, if you're sharing information with students who will grow up to be adults, they will make decisions about whether or not, they're going to choose a certain life path or not. And I also appreciate this distinction between indoctrination and education, because sometimes I feel like indoctrination sometimes gets like synonymous with other things that are negative. And when you make that clear on the front end, I think that helps children understand and families understand that this is just an option and here's the research behind it. So what are some of the things that you share with parents and teachers as you're preparing them to educate our youth?
All right, well, let me go ahead and do my screen and kind of show you what I'll do is a little bit of a walkthrough with some of the things that I do at our teacher training seminars. And that's what I do is I go around the country doing seminars for educators to help them understand how, if they choose, and again, I talk to my educators in many ways the same way as I talk to my young people, and that is you don't have to do this. I'm just laying this out as an option that you may wish to incorporate in your health curriculum. This, by the way, is not sex education, it's abstinence education. We would see those as two different things. And so we don't carry any burden to discuss all things sexual with young people. That's not our goal. We're not trying to inform and educate them about everything there is to do with sex. We have a very limited scope to communicate the one message that most young people aren't hearing today, and that is the exclusive benefits of reserving all sexual activity for marriage. We have a very clear purpose. We want to make sure that in all the noise about sex, that they are having the opportunity to learn about the value and the benefits of sex within the context of marriage. I don't know, for example, in terms of the difference between sex education, I was on a TV show called The Doctors a couple of years ago, and I was talking with this sex education person. And I said to her the same thing I'll throw out to you, and that is, I don't know of a single sex education program in America that will even, and so if you know of one, please let me know honestly, because I want to know if there is one. I don't know of a single sex education program in America that will even give students the information on the benefits of reserving all sexual activity for marriage. I don't know of a sex education program that does that. I did, again, a difference between sex education and abstinence education. We are A&M, abstinence and marriage education. We believe those two things fundamentally have to go together, because we're not saying don't ever have sex. We're simply saying that sex reserved for the context of marriage is what's good and valuable. So I listened to part one. This is part two. I listened to part one, which was an hour on sex education. The word marriage never came up. So that's typical. It's typical. Also, at the end of the podcast, one of the presenters referenced the curriculum that they teach. And so I went and Googled that up and did a word search for marriage. It isn't there. So this is just a common difference that I would make between abstinence education and sex education is Sex education is essentially a codification of the sexual revolution of the 1960s, which basically said, you don't really need to be married. What you need to do is get yourself a bunch of contraceptive products and go out there and have sex with a whole bunch of different people. It'll be fun. It'll be great. And if I'm fair, and I want to be fair, I would say what sex education would say is there's nothing wrong with sex. Sex is natural. Sex is normal. But bad things can happen, like pregnancy or disease, as though those two things are similar. And so what you need to do is you need to learn how to protect yourself from the bad things. And so here's a bunch of contraceptive options that you can choose so that you can enjoy the pleasures of sex, because sex is good. I think that would be the position of sex education. And I would hope to be representing them properly, fairly, and correctly. And I think they would agree that that's their view. Sex is good and wonderful and special, but we want to help people not be harmed by it. Therefore, we will provide contraceptive products. The difference between that and abstinence education is we would also say that sex is a good, natural, normal part of life, but that within the context of marriage, it's the safest, healthiest expression of that sexual activity, and that outside the context of marriage, there are a whole host of potential consequences, not just things like STDs. And pregnancy, we wouldn't even see as a consequence. We don't see pregnancy as a negative thing. We think pregnancy is a good thing, a beautiful thing, a special thing. And in fact, it's so good and so special and so wonderful. We think young people should be encouraged to understand the benefits of reserving pregnancy and childbearing for the context of marriage, where that will be better for the child and better for the adults. And again, we're not just making stuff up. We've got tons of research to back that up, that a child is going to do better in the context of in a home with two married parents. And so we want to communicate that to young people and help them understand that. So that would be my delineation between a sex education program, have sex, but use quote unquote protection. And abstinence education would also say have sex in the context of marriage. That would be the key difference, okay? So our program is going to be exclusively about how to help young people realize and understand why waiting for marriage matters and why marriage is a good and worthy goal. We see marriage as foundational to culture, and marriage and families as necessary to a healthy culture and society. And we want to help young people learn how to form healthy marriages. The internet and the media fills our kids' minds with sexual messages and sexual imagery, right? I mean, there's no lack of sexual imagery and messaging out there. But at my training seminars, I asked the educators if they can help me think through how much of the sex that kids are seeing in the media communicates to them the value of sex within the context of marriage. You don't have to think very long about that. It's just not there. It's very hard to find anywhere in today's mass media, whether that's on the internet or on a television show or in a movie, that demonstrates or encourages the benefits of reserving sex for marriage. And so that's why we exist. We exist to fill this gaping void and to help our young people see sex not as something harmful to be protected from, but rather special and beautiful and wonderful to be enjoyed in its full expression with a marriage partner who's committed to me for life. And so we provide programs. Our curriculum division provides programs for schools around the country.
No, thanks for that clarification with sex education versus abstinence education, because I think some of my listeners may not have even thought about that as two distinct things, because a lot of times, most of us, if we had abstinence education, or at least we thought we had it, it was as an option within sex education, yes, as you said, as not being to protect you from getting pregnant or getting an STD. It was like you said, a form of birth control. But one of the things I found interesting that you said was that that with the abstinence education, that it protects people from other things outside of STDs. So what are some of the things that you communicate that could be a consequence when kids or people are not exuding that self-control over their bodies to wait to have sex when they are in a committed marriage?
Yeah, so we really are going to take a comprehensive approach to that, and we're going to look at the whole person, physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, in every way. So let's take STDs for example. Of the different aspects of the human person, we would say that falls in the physical category, right? If you get genital herpes or something like that, a sexually transmitted disease, we would put that in the physical category. However, does that also have an emotional impact on a person? Does it also have a mental impact on a person? Does it also have a social impact on? We would say that that affects people not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and socially as well. So we're going to walk through those different aspects of human personhood and help them think how sexuality affects those. So, for example, with the social, if a student is sexually active, are there social ramifications to that? And the answer is typically yes, there are. Students who are involved in sexual activity tend to be involved in other risk behaviors, whether that's drugs or alcohol or tobacco usage. And also academic achievement. The Centers for Disease Control has released a report on sexual behavior and academic achievement. And there is a very clear line of demarcation between abstinent teens and sexually active teens, and that the grade performance of sexually active teens is significantly deteriorated over against their abstinent peers. That's research put out by the Centers for Disease Control. So, and that would make sense, right? So if a student is sexually active, there is a mental, emotional, and social impact of that does then impact academic performance. One of the things that we're very much committed to communicating to our young people is what's called the success sequence. And the success sequence is something identified by researchers. Maybe you're familiar with it, but it basically has three essential components that it's not a guarantee, but it's simply a pathway that can be and often is beneficial for young people. And the three steps are: number one, graduate either from high school, a GED, or college, but get a degree, get a diploma. So finish a level of education, whether that's high school or college. And then get a job, full-time employment, so you are self-sufficient and not dependent on someone else. So graduate, get a job, get an employment. And then thirdly, reserve childbearing for the context of marriage. So marry before having children. What the researchers tell us, and this is Brookings Institute, this is American Enterprise Institute, this is University of Virginia, many places that have put these studies out. I think Barbara Defoe Whitehead, Marlene Pearson, many people have looked at this. Brad Wilcox, Ron Haskins, a number of different researchers. Anyway, so what they're saying is students who graduate, get a job, marry, and then have children in that order tend to do well. It is almost impossible following that pattern to end up below the poverty line or on welfare. And so family really it goes to family formation, right? So it's academic achievement, employment skills, and marriage and family. So those are the things that are very consistent with what we're trying to teach our kids in abstinence education. And we find that it is very, very helpful for young people to know these things.
So I appreciate you sharing that. It's almost like this progression, and it's not just about the individual child. It's about the consequences and the impact of the greater society if you don't have
Yes.
these solid family units entering society, because there's a lack of education, lack of employment, and a lack of this family structure. Um, in your work, do you guys talk about like puberty and like the emotions and the hormones that kids have that sometimes make them feel like they need to engage in sexual activity, or if they're feeling attracted to someone? You guys talk about what students can do if they are choosing to follow the abstinence path, but they're finding it difficult, but they want to do it.
Yes, very much so. So one of the core components of what we're going to teach is self-control, right? That's resisting bodily urges of all different. That goes with eating too, for example, right? So just learning self-control. Think about this: where in our culture today is there any sort of lesson or expression of self-control for young people? It's really lacking, right? So kids today have access to so much, and what they're not learning is self-discipline, self-control, learning how to regulate behaviors. Again, that goes to with terms of diet, exercise, and a whole host of areas. That is going to be a consistent message. And that's the other thing. Everything that we're teaching them is consistent with good health. And so, yes, what we do is what's called refusal skills, and how to resist sexual pressure, how to communicate your beliefs, how to understand the benefits of not only making a commitment, and that's a big part of it. It's basically having the resolve that there is something worth waiting for. This is another key part of why marriage comes into our conversation. If the message is just don't have sex, that's a very difficult message to be able to embrace because there's no benefit to it seemingly. So in other words, the marriage and family and successful future, we would say, that they're looking for is the motivator toward that end. For example, when we talk to kids about goal setting, which we think is very important, all of our programs start off with goal setting. Where do you want to go in life? What do you want to be? How are you going to get? It's really important to help students think about setting goals. And when I do that, they will often say to me, one of their goals is college. So we're talking about middle school students, high school students. So if I'm at the standing at the chalkboard writing things down, asking them about their future hopes and goals and dreams, college will almost always come up. So I'm able to say to them, now, time out a minute. Are you telling me that you love school so much you can't wait to get out of here so you can go sit down for 4 more years and sit in class? Of course not. They're not telling you they want to go to college because they love going to school and taking tests and doing homework. They're not saying they want to go to college for that reason. No. They want to go to college because they understand that college provides, hopefully, a pathway to a better future. If I go to college, it will help me learn things that will help me do well. And so this, again, is going to be consistent with coming back to self-discipline. In other words, there's reasons why I want to do things. So I'm going to resist sexual pressure, not because my body doesn't want it, it does. But I'm learning self-control, and I have the ability to control myself, and I need to control myself in a host of areas. This is one of many areas in which I need to control myself. I need to study well in school so that I can get into a college, so that I can get the job that I want, so that. And so they understand that already. This comes back to education versus indoctrination. I'm not just telling them stuff. I'm helping draw out of them things they already know, which is what good education is. So I'm wanting to sort of take their starting point of, I want to go to college because I want life to go well for me. I want to be an educated person and I want to have a pathway. Let's start there. They all have that. And by the way, as it relates to marriage, the University of Michigan does fantastic research called the Monitoring the Future Survey. And in that survey, what they find year after year, well, it's not sequential years because they only ask the particular question in certain years, but over the past, I want to say 4 decades now, I think starting in the 70s, is that 4 decades? Maybe more. I think 77 is the first one that I've seen, but they ask this question: how important is it to you to have a good marriage and family? And I think you'd be surprised at the percentage of high school seniors saying having a good marriage and family is quite or extremely important to me. It's about 90% consistently over the last 4 decades. So that is what that tells me, is that young people universally have a desire for their future to go well. And for a large measure, that includes getting married and having a family. But no one's talking to them about how to where do they learn about that? Where do they learn today about how to form a healthy marriage and family? And like I said, sex education isn't going to talk about that. And so we think that's a massive gap that needs to be filled. And here's the key thing, it's one that kids are dying to learn about. It's something that they don't get to learn about. And when they do get to learn about, it's like water to a thirsty soul. They are very, very grateful to have the education on how to prepare for a healthy future marriage. They all have it in here. They want it, but no one's really talking to them about it. It's one of the reasons why our programs work so well.
No, I agree about that because students, they have a thirst for knowledge. And most people want their future to be positive and well and
Who
healthy and
doesn't?
great.
Who doesn't?
And when they don't have the opportunity to get questions answered from trusted sources, they're going to seek out answers. And they may not be rooted in research, or in fact, it could be something some kid's older brother told him that is not anywhere based in reality. So I think it's super important. So thinking about abstinence-based education, what age or group are, I guess, do you say start to have these conversations in elementary school, wait till kids hit puberty, when they get to middle school? When do you suggest, if I'm a parent that's choosing this path for
Yes.
my children, like when should I start these conversations?
Yeah, good point. Our programs run 6th through 12th grade. Again, we're going to provide materials for parents and educators, and most of our materials are designed for grades 6 through 12. Even 6 is a little bit early for some kids, but we have a number of schools that like doing it in the 6th grade, and it does work there. I find that there are large leaps between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Those are big stair steps. I find I prefer working with the 7th graders as a starting point, but some will start in 6th graders. Younger than 6, what I encourage parents to do is read through our materials, and as appropriate, be starting some of those conversations a little bit earlier with the material that you feel is most appropriate at that age level. I'm not an advocate of starting really early. I know many people are. Many people are advocating that you start, very young. That's fine. That's their opinion. It's not mine. I don't share it. We find that it works best starting in about the 6th grade to have the conversation. Now, the caveat to that is, with the internet, with the screens, with the phones, our kids are being exposed at earlier and earlier ages. And so that has to factor in. So in that case, I think parents do need to have conversations to the extent that they're exposed to these things, right? All parents are going to have different exposure rates with their kids, depending on their parenting style, depending on their environment. So yes, definitely parents need to be having conversations with their kids earlier, especially if they're exposed to more and more through technology or friends or school or whatever.
I know you have some materials that you wanted to share. I'm going to put back the share screen so you can share a little bit of your resources that you wanted to share.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I was going to do, let me put, do you see my full screen now?
I do.
All right, so let me just run through a few things here real quickly then. This is part of what I will cover in a typical training seminar, which kind of gives some of the foundation. Some of this I've kind of gone through quickly in a riff, but I'll go through it just briefly here. So how did I get into this? I started off by doing counseling, and I kept seeing issues in people that I was trying to help and counsel that all seem to have a common root of sexual activity outside the context of marriage. And so it was that led me into the work that I'm doing now. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation and others, teens today are exposed to about 9 hours of media per day. And then you think about all the imagery that they're getting today. I already went over this, but there's no sense in which kids in watching media would even see a relationship between sex and marriage, let alone a positive one. They're going to see all forms of sexuality without seeing sexuality within the context of marriage. That's a concern that is having an impact on our young people. And our goal then is to address that concern. So yes, our curriculum division, A&M Resources, provides 4 different programs for schools or parents or homeschoolers. If they want to go through these materials with their kids, they can. The first one, AC Green's Game Plan, we did with AC Green from the NBA. He was a 3-time NBA champion with the LA Lakers. He played for several different teams, and we wrote this book together to help young people understand the benefits of waiting. AC Green was an outspoken advocate for waiting until marriage. And then we wrote Quest and Aspire and Navigator. And so these are just all four workbooks are going to have the same essential message that sex is wonderful and special and beautiful and best reserved for the context of a marriage relationship. And we're going to use different stories, different analogy, different statistics, facts, and figures to make the same essential point. Okay. I want to help parents and educators. We're one of the leading providers of programs in the country, some 2 million kids. These are schools or organizations around the country that have used our programs. And right now we're doing a lot of work in Illinois, for example. This is the Chicago area, just to give you an idea. Okay, zip through some of this. So this is a question I like to ask. Of all the issues that we're concerned about regarding our teens, what is the fundamental problem that we face today? And as I work through these discussions with our educators at our seminars, the normal answer here is going to be the fourth one, breakdown of marriage and family. What we're typically going to understand is things like teen pregnancies, STDs, and sexual activity tend to be symptomatic of broken marriage and family. And so what I'm saying is let's step back and understand the larger framework of what it is we're dealing with. I would say that things like teen pregnancy and STDs and even sexual activity are symptoms. We don't want to spend our time chasing symptoms. We want to actually understand and identify the core problem here. So Glenn Stanton wrote a book called Why Marriage Matters. He's a researcher, and his analysis of the available data indicates, as he says here, of all the social problems facing American civilization, the decline of marriage, breakup of the family is unquestionably our most pressing problem. Its impact is widespread and comprehensively destructive. And he goes on to delineate some of that. When men and women fail to form stable marriages, the first result is a vast expansion of government attempts to cope with the terrible social needs that result. There is scarcely a dollar the state and federal government spends on social programs. It is not driven in large part by family fragmentation, crime, poverty, drug abuse, teen pregnancy, school failure, mental and physical health problems. Maggie Gallagher, also as a researcher, along with Linda Wade at the University of Chicago, wrote the book, The Case for Marriage. And what they were saying is that when you look at cultures where you have strong, healthy marriages, you do not see the family fragmentation and the crime and the poverty and drug abuse and so forth that are associated with those things. So this is just a matter of understanding the benefits of marriage and family. Now, here's one that I want to share with you that is a real surprise to most people. I find when I ask where the highest rates of birth outside of marriage occur, most people are going to be very surprised by the answer. And I won't put you on the spot and give an answer right now as I do in my seminars, because
Well, based on what you said, it feels like my gut would say the teenage range, but based as you said, that's not what people would think. I think maybe it's like older. So,
well, see, you're a good student. You're a good student. You're onto something. So let's take a look at the answer. You're right. Most people are going to say ages 15 to 19 or 20. Actually, 20 to 24 is the largest raise of hands in the room, and then 15 to 19. Well, here's the answer. Every once in a while, I'll get someone that says 25 to 30, which is the answer. Highest rates 25 to 30. Number two, then, is going to be, ready? Number three. And now what do you think number four is going to be?
Oh, I'm trying to think if it's going to be the higher range.
I know. Now I'm going to put you on the spot.
Making my brain work. I want to say, yeah, the 35 to 40 would be number four. So so the lowest range would be the teenagers.
By quite a margin. Quite a margin. And then when you take the teenager and you break that down further, because see, when I say teenagers, we think high school, right? And so we need to sort of step back and say, well, no, teen includes college age kids. So let's zoom in on this 15 to 19 segment. And when we do, look at what we're going to find. We're going to find that the vast majority of teen pregnancies are actually college age girls, not high school girls. And then if you compare the high schoolers with everybody else, look at what you find, that the percentage of non-marital births is dramatically higher among adults 18 and above. 95% of all non-marital births are the 18 and above.
Well, learn something new every day.
Right? Now, here's Illinois, just because these are workshops I was doing for Illinois recently. I've got the Illinois data in here, but the US data is parallel. The graph for US would look identical to this, okay? This just happens to be the Illinois data, which is consistent with the national data. And what you see is that teen pregnancies, teen births, and teen abortions are all at all-time recorded lows. Now, nobody knows this, okay? Nobody knows. I would not know this if I didn't do this for a living. You won't read this in the paper. And so it's important for us, again, to sort of step back and understand kind of where we're at and what's happening. And you can see dramatic decreases in the Illinois birth rate, for example. These aren't minor drops. These are seismic.
This is pretty significant. I think, there's rampant fear that if we don't have these conversations, kids are going to get pregnant. But it sounds like some of the people that need to be in the classes are actually the adults.
You are really onto something, because here's the point that I would make with you on what you just said. We have no trouble with this message with teenagers. Teenagers eat this stuff up. They love it. It's the adults. It's the adults that are the difficulty. If we can get the adults to sign on, seriously, if you get in front of the kids, they eat it up. But in too many cases, it's the adults. So I think you're onto something there. All right, let's see what I've got next. I can't see my next slide, but so this is fascinating. So let's go to the next slide in just a moment. So here you see dramatic drops in Illinois births, and you say, well, what's the cause of this? And the cause would be, what's going to be the cause of decreased birth rates? I mean, there's really going to be two things, right? It's going to be increased contraceptive use among teens and less sexual activity among teens. And the answer is those two things, certainly contraception. I would say, one of the pushbacks I get is, oh, you're not teaching kids about condoms. Well, we're not concerned about the condom message. That message is ubiquitous. It's kind of like the mask thing, everybody needs it. Yeah, we get it. Condoms, kids get the condom message. You can go anywhere and kids will say, oh yeah, make sure to protect yourself. What this chart shows from the National Survey of Family Growth government data is that 97%, that's virtually all sexually active females, have used condoms. And so that's not a message that is lacking in society. Again, the lacking message is the benefits of waiting until marriage. So condoms are certainly a big part, as well as the pill and the patch and the shot. All of those things have indeed contributed to a lower birth rate. But a couple other things. Birth rates overall are down, not just among teens, but overall. But then secondly, how is it that you have STD rates at all-time highs? So here, riddle me this, Batman. How do you have all-time low pregnancies and birth rates and all-time high STD rates? How is that happening?
That is a good question.
Well, except it's not that difficult. Because contraceptives are designed to prevent the fertilization of an egg. That's what all these contraceptive methods are not disease prevention methods. They are contraceptives. The word contraception simply means conception, to conceive, the fertilization of the egg. Contra, the negative prefix, it's to prevent. It's against conception. That's what contraception is. It's against conception. And all these products are designed to that end. So very effective in accomplishing their intended purpose to prevent fertilization and thus pregnancy. But they are woefully inadequate to prevent the spread of disease. And so STD rates are at an all-time high. So condom usage is up, but look at this. Sexual activity among teens. This is Centers for Disease Control, latest data out of the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance. It comes out every 2 years. Our latest data is 19. 21 might be out now. I'll have to go back and take a look at that. But last I checked, which was not too long ago, it was still 19. Look at this. According to the CDC, you've got about a quarter of teens in high school age teens are sexually active. The reason this is important is because I know one of your questions has to do with misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions about our work is, well, you know, they're all doing it. They're all doing it. There's not, the best thing you can do is throw condoms at them because they're all going to do it anyway. And the reality is that most are not doing it. A significant majority of high school students are not currently sexually active, according to the CDC. And about half have never had any sexual contact of any kind. So the reality is that most teens are abstinent, and what they need from adults and parents and teachers is guidance and help and encouragement to stay focused academically, to avoid sexual pressures, and to reserve sexual activity for the context of marriage, because that is optimally the safest, healthiest choice. It's inarguable, it's not debatable. And so we have an obligation, I believe, as educators to communicate that to our young people. So a large drop in sexual activity among teens. Some people attribute this to the rise of the internet. Certainly there's something to that. But for whatever reasons, sexual activity is down among teens. This is the chart that I'm just building my charts off of. You can see it's that currently sexually active one down there is the one that I just built that chart off of, 37.5 down to 27.4. Okay. But here's the graph that I really wanted to get to because this is the one that most animates our work. We are greatly concerned about the very sharp rise in non-marital births nationally. This is something that should cause great concern because where we do not have strong marriages and families, we're going to have other issues that we're going to have to deal with. Now, you can see from this chart that in about 1960, something happened, right? I'm not a rocket scientist, but I can look at this and go, I would say it's around 1960 that the wheels came off. And you can see the stability of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then kaboom, this is what is referred to as the, wait for it, sexual revolution. And so the sexual revolution has had a dramatic impact on our culture. And again, I'm saying sex education is essentially a codification of the sexual revolution. We're teaching the sexual revolution, which is nothing about marriage. And again, if you know of a sex education curriculum in America that teaches kids about the benefits of waiting until marriage, please shoot it over to me because I'd like to see it. Never seen that. So that's a real problem. And so what the sex education message is not wait until marriage, but wait until you get yourself some contraception. And once you get yourself some contraception, you're good to go. Now, that's not just me. That's the smart people. Listen to this from, this is Brad Wilcox at the University of Virginia. And he says, over the course of the last 40 years, more children have been born and reared outside of a married home, at least in part because the sexual revolution undercut the norm of premarital sexual abstinence. Most scholars who have studied the nation's recent retreat from marriage over the last 4 decades agree that the sexual revolution played an important role in fueling this retreat. And then listen to what he quotes here. Dr. George Akerlof, a Nobel Prize-winning economist at the University of California, Berkeley, argues that the sexual revolution, aided in part by widespread contraception, fueled a dramatic increase in premarital sex and reduced the normative imperative that men should take responsibility for the children they help bring into the world by marrying. These two developments in turn led to dramatic increases in non-marital childbearing. Well, that's the graph we're looking at. So here you have a Nobel Prize winning economist, professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and he says that this graph is an indication of the influence of the sexual revolution in the 1960s and the widespread availability at that time of contraception. And so again, that's what sex education classes are going to essentially teach, and that we are trying to help young people understand why this particular graph is not necessarily helpful for our society. So in 1960, you had 1 in 20 kids born to a married mom and dad. That was 1 in 3. Born outside of marriage. 1 in 20 born outside the context of marriage. By the year 2000, that had gone all the way to 1 in 3. And the question then is, where is this going? I mean, is it going to be the case that soon in the United States, most American children will be born outside the context of marriage? Now, the CDC breaks this down demographically. We're already over 1 in 2 in the Hispanic community, and almost 3/4, 2/3 to 3/4 in the Black community. So, all of this is of concern, because our goal is, whether they're white kids, Hispanic kids, or Black kids, we believe strongly that all young people should have the opportunity. Again, that's our key word in our mission statement. Our key word is opportunity. We believe that every kid in the country should have the opportunity to learn about these things. And again, when we teach kids, what I say is, we're not saying you have to do this. You do not have to wait until you're married to have sex. What we're trying to help you understand is, here are the benefits of doing so. Whatever you choose to do, completely up to you. But here's the information you need to know. Now, this graph also is, this graph is all age ranges. Now, watch what happens when we zoom in on just the young 20-somethings. In the United States, you already have over 50% of children born in the United States to women in their young 20s are over 50%, and almost 90% in the Black community. So this should be of concern to us. I actually have a quote from Barack Obama that I think really kind of gets to this. It was a Father's Day speech he gave, and I'd like to read it, just a portion of it, because I think what President Obama was saying here is perfectly consistent with what we're trying to teach young people regarding these things and the success sequence. Obama said, "Of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, we're reminded today that family is the most important. We are called to recognize and honor how critical every father is to that foundation. They are teachers and coaches. They are mentors and role models. They are examples of success and men who constantly push us toward it. But if we're honest with ourselves, we'll admit that what too many fathers also are is missing from too many lives and too many homes. They have abandoned their responsibilities, acting like boys instead of men. And the foundations of our families are weaker because of it. You and I know how true this is in the African American community. We know that more than half of all Black children live in single-parent households, a number that has doubled since we were children. We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems, to run away from home, or become teenage parents themselves. And the foundations of our community are weaker because of it. We also need families to raise children. We need fathers to realize that responsibility does not end at conception. We need them to realize that what makes you a man is not the ability to have a child, it's the courage to raise one. And then he's going to get into something that we make a very clear point of, because when I'm teaching this to young people, I'm going to say to them, now listen. When I say that it's best for kids to have a mom and a dad, am I saying that a single mom can't be a great mom, can't do a great job? No, of course not. In fact, most single moms are doing a heroic job. It's tough. And they're working very, very hard. And most of them are heroes. So I've been saying that for years. And then I saw this in President Obama's quote. We need to help all the mothers out there who are raising these kids by themselves, The mothers who drop them off at school, go to work, pick them up in the afternoon, work another shift, get dinner, make lunches, pay the bills, fix the house, and all the other things it takes both parents to do. So many of these women are doing a heroic job, but they need support. They need another parent. Their children need another parent. That's what keeps their foundation strong. It's what keeps the foundation of our country strong. And it goes on, but you get the point. I think President Obama was saying in that speech everything that we're saying in our program. And that is, we want to help a new generation of young people understand how to form healthy marriages and families. And it begins by learning discipline and self-control, focusing on academic achievement, resisting sexual pressure, and reserving sex for marriage. And so here's our mission statement that I began with, that we seek to ensure that every teenager in the country has the opportunity to hear a clearly reasoned, positive presentation on the benefits of abstinence until marriage and instruction on preparing for a healthy future marriage. Well, I could go on, but you better stop me here because this train's rolling.
No, what I really appreciate is, I think in both episodes, it expanded past just like sexual activity. It's more to it. And what I appreciate about what you're saying is you're pushing kids to think about like goals for their whole entire life, not just this one activity. And then you're saying that based on the research, when children are coming from two-parent homes, they are less likely to have certain outcomes. So it's not just like me like doing whatever I want when I want and not having control over myself, but it's me having control over myself because my actions will have a ripple effect, not just on myself, but any children I create or anybody I enter into a relationship with, which will trickle down into the greater society. And I think a lot of times when we're having this conversation, we're not even talking about like my actions impacting others and talking about the skill of self-control, because now when you mentioned the sexual revolution, that has turned to some people now being in counseling and therapy for sex addiction because they have no self-control, and self-control is a skill that we need in life, whether it's sexual activity, what we're eating, being active, saving our money, because that's self-control. So there's so many aspects with your programming that I believe the skills are applicable to many aspects in life. And then, as you said, it's an opportunity. And I also feel that we don't give students enough credit for their ability to take in information and make informed decisions about how they want to live. And then when I think about the data you showed, when you broke down that teenager also means college student, I think about being at Purdue and you just walked in and there was just this basket of condoms. And like, it's just like, and you can just sign up and get birth control because now you're an adult. You don't have to involve your parents. But there wasn't this whole thing of like, if I'm in college and I have a kid, what is the impact on that kid now being born to me while I'm in school and all these other things. So I appreciated what you said about the fact that it's not just this conversation is important for our students, but this conversation is important for us to live by even as adults out in the world.
Well, let me just jump in there because that's a very important point that you just made. See, it's not about you need to hear this message because you're just little kids, you're too young. It's not that. I'm not telling them anything that doesn't also apply to myself. I too need to exercise self-control and reserve sexual activity for the context of marriage. See, think about this. The whole condom message, for example, the bowl of condoms at Purdue, for example. What habits and patterns and lifestyle are you learning and practicing and developing? And how is that preparing you for healthy future marriage? If the message is just make sure that you've got a condom just in case, because you never know, sex could break out at any time. How does that work in real life? In terms of when you're married in the future. So one of the illustrations I use in my seminars, for example, is I'll say, look, when a guy is married and he's away from his wife on a business trip, should he have sex with anybody he meets along the way? Or should he reserve all sexual activity for the context of his marriage? See, in other words, it's the same. Whether you're a junior high kid, a senior high kid, or whether you're married, the message is the same, that sex is best reserved for the context of a marriage relationship. And if the message is when the husband is leaving on a business trip for a week, the wife doesn't say, "Oh, honey, make sure to take a box of condoms with you because you never know who you're going to meet along the way." See, in other words, that message isn't applicable. What I'm teaching young people, self-discipline and self-control, it's fidelity. It's understanding that when I make a commitment, that when I say I do, I will. We're teaching healthy future marriage as well. We're teaching them the skills and the character qualities and the traits that are going to be necessary to form a healthy, stable marriage relationship. Not just have condoms in case you happen to meet someone. But it's far more developed than that. It's far more rich and rewarding and beneficial for our young people than what I would call a shallow, superficial message of the bucket of condoms.
Well, we're coming to a close on our episode, and normally what I do is give you the big screen just to share some final thoughts. Definitely let my followers know where they can find you at, because you definitely share some curriculum that
Yes.
parents, teachers may want to get their hands on. So.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so two things. So we have ampartnership.org is Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership. And that's where we do a lot of our policy work and advocacy and encouragement and so forth. And then our curriculum division, where you can get the materials, that is successsequence.com. I talked about what the success sequence is. And so you can go to successsequence.com and you will find there our curriculum division has not only the paper workbooks like these. Here, I've got them here in my hands. You can see that this is the game plan book, Quest, and then it goes Aspire, and then a Navigator. These are the 4 workbooks that I mentioned. You can not only order paper workbooks for your kids to go through, but we also have an online learning course that's been developed that's really good. It has video teaching, it has stories. There's a lot more involved in the video component, the online learning course, and that is also available at successsequence.com. You can get the rest of our contact information there too, ampartnership.org and successsequence.com. You can shoot us an email or call us anyway. We're happy to help you out. And particularly if you're a teacher, an educator, a superintendent. I will be in Indiana, by the way, at the teacher training seminar for the health teachers at the end of this month. Are we February yet? No, end of next month. End of February, beginning of March, I think it is, in Indianapolis. So.
Well, thank you, Scott. I much enjoyed talking to you this afternoon, and I definitely learned information, and I'm going to check out your curriculum because it sounds very interesting, and I really appreciate you giving us the bigger context of abstinence education, because I think that is definitely lacking, and I'm glad to hear that you are providing these opportunities for parents to better have these conversations, and for teachers who are implementing your curriculum to implement it and provide this as an option and an opportunity for students to use. So guys, thanks for tuning in, and until next time.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.